On the night she almost lost everything, a poor single mother ran through a snowstorm with her burning, feverish baby in her arms, straight into the mansion of the richest and most feared man in the city. People said he was cold, untouchable, a man who owned half of New York and had no mercy left in his heart. But that night, when he saw the little girl's eyes, something inside him broke. And what he offered that desperate mother just hours later would change all three of their lives forever. If stories about love, sacrifice, and unexpected second chances touch your heart, take a moment to subscribe. Now let me tell you how it all began. It was a freezing January morning in New York. The kind of cold that cuts through your clothes and settles deep in your bones. Cassidy Moore was on her knees, scrubbing the restroom floor on the 12th floor of an office building. The smell of chemicals burned her nose, and her hands were red and cracked from the cold water. It was barely 5 in the morning. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced at the screen, and her heart dropped. The daycare. Nobody calls that early unless something is wrong. She pulled off her gloves with shaking fingers and answered. The teacher's voice was calm, almost too calm. Emma had developed a high fever during the night. She was coughing badly. The daycare couldn't keep a sick child. Cassidy needed to come immediately. The call ended before Cassidy could even respond. For a second, she just stood there, frozen. Emma, her 8-month-old daughter. The only family she had left in this world. Cassidy grabbed her coat and ran out without telling anyone. Snow was falling hard now, the wind slapping her face as she hurried down the street. She ran 3 blocks because she didn't have money for a cab. By the time she reached the daycare, her lips were numb and her legs felt like ice. Emma lay in the teacher's arms, her tiny face flushed red, her weak cries sounding like a sick kitten. When Cassidy held her, the heat from the baby's body scared her. Her daughter was burning. Their apartment was a single damp room in a run-down building in Brooklyn. The heater had been broken for 2 weeks. The landlord kept promising to fix it. He never came. Cassidy wrapped Emma in every blanket she owned and opened the medicine cabinet. Empty. She had used the last fever medicine days ago. Tears slid down her cheeks as she held her daughter, rocking gently, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mama's here." Her phone rang again. This time, it was her cleaning company. Her manager didn't even let her explain. There was a special assignment today. A VIP client. A mansion on the Upper East Side. If Cassidy didn't show up, she was fired. Cassidy stared at the cracked wall of her room, her baby trembling in her arms. If she lost her job, she couldn't pay rent. No rent meant the street. And the last thing she could risk was being found. Because somewhere out there, her violent ex-husband, Derek, was still looking for her. She had spent 6 months hiding, moving from place to place, trying to keep her daughter safe. Now she had a choice. Stay home with her sick baby and lose everything. Or go to work and pray nothing went wrong. She dressed Emma in layers, wrapped her in blankets, packed a bottle, diapers, and borrowed medicine from a neighbor. Then she placed her in an old stroller she'd bought for $5 at a thrift store. And together, they stepped into the snow. The Upper East Side felt like a different world. Clean streets. Luxury stores. Expensive cars. People who didn't look at the ground when they walked. Cassidy felt invisible. Or maybe worse, like she didn't belong. Then she stopped. In front of her stood a massive mansion, surrounded by tall iron gates carved with lion heads. This was the address. She hesitated, her hands tightening on the stroller handle. Emma whimpered softly. Cassidy pushed the gate. It opened without a sound. Inside, the mansion felt cold and empty, like a place forgotten by time. The rooms were enormous, decorated with expensive furniture and dark marble floors, but there was dust everywhere. And no heat. Cassidy searched room after room, panic rising as Emma began coughing harder. Finally, on the third floor, she found a study with a working heater. Warm air flowed into the room. Relief hit her so hard she nearly cried. She placed Emma near the warmth, gave her medicine, and waited until the baby finally fell asleep. Then Cassidy went back downstairs to work. She scrubbed the staircase carefully, moving quickly. She didn't want to meet the owner. Something about this house made her uneasy. That's when she heard it. A cry. Not loud, but sharp. Frightened. Emma. Cassidy dropped the mop and ran. Up the stairs. 2 at a time. Her heart pounding so hard she couldn't breathe. But when she reached the study, the crying had stopped. She pushed the door open. And froze. A tall man stood in the middle of the room. Broad shoulders. Dark coat. Still as stone. And in his arms was her daughter. For a second, Cassidy couldn't move. Then she saw the gun on the desk, and the man slowly turned around. That was the moment she realized. She had brought her baby into the home of the richest and most dangerous man in New York. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. If you were in Cassidy's place, poor, alone, and desperate, would you have taken that job? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Because what happened next was something Cassidy never expected. And it was only the beginning. Cassidy's breath caught in her throat. The man holding Emma looked down at the baby, gently swaying her as if he had done it 1,000 times before. One large hand supported her head. The other rested protectively along her back. Emma wasn't crying anymore. She was staring up at him, her tiny fingers wrapped around the collar of his coat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then his eyes lifted. They were gray, cold at first glance, but not empty. There was something buried deep inside them. Something tired. Something wounded. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice was low and calm. No anger. No panic. Just quiet authority. Cassidy swallowed hard. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to step forward. "I'm Cassidy Moore," she said, her voice trembling. "The cleaning service sent me. I didn't know you were coming back today." His gaze moved over her slowly. Her worn shoes. Her thin coat. Her tired face. Then back to the baby. "She's yours," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Cassidy whispered. "Please, may I take her?" For a second, he didn't move. Then Emma made a soft sound and tightened her grip on his collar. Something flickered across his face. "She was crying," he said quietly. "I heard her when I came in. No one should cry alone in a house this big." The words hit Cassidy harder than she expected. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "She's sick. The daycare wouldn't keep her. I didn't have anyone to watch her, and I couldn't lose this job. I won't bring her again. Please don't fire me." The silence that followed felt heavy. Finally, he stepped closer and gently placed Emma back into her arms. His hands lingered for just a second, like it was harder to let go than he expected. "How old?" he asked. 8 months. The man froze. His eyes closed. 1 second. 2. When he opened them again, the gray looked darker somehow. "My son would have been 8 months," he said quietly. "If he were alive." Cassidy didn't know what to say. She just held Emma tighter. The man turned away and walked toward the window, staring out at the falling snow. "You can bring her," he said. Cassidy blinked. "I'm sorry." "You can bring your child here whenever you need to. This room is warm. It's safer than wherever you came from." For a moment, Cassidy thought she had heard wrong. Then he added, still facing the window, "I don't like children being cold." Her eyes filled with tears she wasn't ready for. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. Then he turned. I'm Maxwell Thornton. The name hit her like ice water. Everyone in New York knew that name. Billionaire. Business empire. Power. Influence. And rumors. Dark ones. People said he didn't just own companies. He owned people. Cassidy suddenly felt very small standing in front of him. Maxwell studied her expression, as if he could see the fear forming. You don't need to be afraid, he said calmly. If you're here, you're under my protection. Protection. The word sounded strange coming from a man like him. I need coffee, he added. Do you know how to make it? Yes. Good. As Cassidy turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Cassidy. She froze. Welcome to Thornton Manor. She carried Emma downstairs on shaking legs, her heart pounding so hard it almost hurt. The kitchen was larger than her entire apartment. She set the coffee machine, then sat down for a moment, holding Emma close. What did we walk into, baby? She whispered. That night, back in her cold apartment, Cassidy couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he held Emma. The way his voice changed when he spoke about his son. And the way a man with so much power had spoken to her like she mattered. The next morning, her phone rang. A woman's voice introduced herself as Gloria, the house manager at Thornton Manor. Mr. Thornton wanted Cassidy to work there full-time. 3 times her current salary. Housing included. Cassidy stared at Emma, lying beside her in their freezing room. Mold on the walls. A broken heater. No savings. And Derek still out there somewhere. I accept, she said. Moving into the mansion felt like stepping into another life. Her room was small but warm. Clean sheets. A real crib for Emma. Hot water. Food that didn't have to be counted or stretched. For the first time in months, Cassidy slept through the night. But comfort came with fear. Men in dark suits moved through the house quietly. Cameras watched every hallway. Expensive cars came and went at strange hours. And Maxwell himself. He was rarely seen. Like a ghost. But Cassidy noticed something. Whenever he was home, he always looked for Emma. He never picked her up. Never spoke to her. He just stood nearby, watching. One night, Cassidy woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen. Voices came from the living room. Maxwell's voice. Cold. Sharp. They touched my shipment? Another man answered, younger. I'll handle it, brother. No, Maxwell said. Just remind them who runs this city. Cassidy stepped back quietly, but her foot bumped a chair. The sound echoed. Silence fell. Slow footsteps approached. Maxwell appeared in the doorway. His gray eyes locked onto hers. What did you hear? He asked. Cassidy's heart raced, but she didn't lie. Enough to know you're not just a businessman. He studied her for a long moment. Then why are you still here? She took a breath. Because you gave my daughter a safe place to sleep. And no one else ever did. Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, but something close. You're safe here, he said finally. No one touches what's mine. That night, as Cassidy lay beside Emma, she realized something strange. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. But 2 weeks later, as she walked home from a grocery run, carrying a bag in one hand and thinking about Emma's dinner, she saw a man standing across the street, watching her. Dirty coat, bloodshot eyes, a familiar smile. Derek. And the moment their eyes met, Cassidy knew the nightmare had found her again. For a second, Cassidy couldn't breathe. The world around her faded. The traffic noise, the people walking past, the sound of the city, everything went quiet. Derek was thinner than before. His clothes were worn, his hair unwashed, but the look in his eyes was the same. That sharp, bitter anger. That sense of ownership. He smiled when he saw the fear on her face. "Found you," he called out, his voice carrying across the street. Cassidy dropped the grocery bag and ran. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she rushed down the sidewalk, her boots slipping on the wet pavement. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. All she could think about was Emma. If Derek found out where she lived, if he came near the mansion, if he ever got close to her daughter. Footsteps pounded behind her. "Cassidy," he shouted. "You really thought you could hide from me?" She turned the corner into a narrow side street, hoping to lose him. Bad choice. The street ended in a brick wall. Cassidy stopped short, her chest heaving, her lungs burning from the cold air. Slow footsteps approached behind her. Derek walked into the alley like he had all the time in the world. 6 months, he said, shaking his head. 6 months I've been looking for you. Sleeping in shelters, asking around, chasing every lead. And here you are, living in a rich neighborhood like you belong. Cassidy backed up until the cold brick pressed against her spine. "Derek, please," she said, her voice shaking. "Just leave us alone." "Us?" he laughed. "You mean my daughter?" The word hit her like a slap. "She's not yours," Cassidy said. "You lost that right a long time ago." His face darkened. "You don't get to decide that," he snapped. "You don't get to take what's mine and run." He stepped closer. Cassidy could smell the alcohol on his breath. "You embarrassed me," he said quietly. "You ran. You told people things. You made me look like a monster." "You were a monster," she whispered. The words barely left her mouth before his hand shot out and grabbed her throat. Her head slammed back against the wall. "You should have stayed," he hissed. "You should have known better." Cassidy clawed at his wrist, trying to pull his hand away, but his grip tightened. Black spots danced in her vision. Then the first punch came. Pain exploded across her face. Another. She slid down the wall, collapsing onto the cold ground. Derek kicked her hard in the side. "Thought you were too good for me?" he shouted. "Thought some rich guy would save you?" "Emma." The thought cut through the pain. Cassidy forced herself to move, to crawl, to get up. She had to get back. She had to get home. Derek grabbed her hair and yanked her backward. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. "You're going to die right here. And then I'll find the kid." Something inside Cassidy broke. Not fear. Fury. With the last bit of strength she had, she twisted and scratched across his face, her nails digging deep. Derek screamed and loosened his grip. Cassidy pushed herself up and tried to run. She made it 3 steps. Then he tackled her from behind, slamming her onto the pavement. His hands wrapped around her throat again. This time tighter. The sky above her blurred. The sounds of the city faded. All she could see was Emma's face in her mind. "Mama." "I'm sorry, baby." The pressure suddenly disappeared. Air rushed back into her lungs as she coughed and gasped. Through watering eyes, she saw 2 men in dark suits pulling Derek off her, holding his arms behind his back as he struggled and cursed. And then she saw him. Maxwell stood at the end of the alley. Still. Silent. But his eyes. They weren't cold anymore. They burned. He walked forward slowly, each step calm and controlled. Derek stopped struggling when he saw him. "Who the hell are you?" Derek spat. Maxwell didn't answer. He walked past him and knelt beside Cassidy instead. His hand hovered near her face, careful, gentle. "Look at me," he said softly. Cassidy lifted her head. His jaw tightened when he saw the bruising, the blood at the corner of her mouth. "Who did this to you?" he asked. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Maxwell stood and turned. For a long moment, he simply looked at Derek. There was no shouting, no threats. That quiet made it worse. Derek tried to laugh, but it came out weak. "This is my wife. Family business. Stay out of it." Maxwell stepped closer. He said calmly. "She was your wife." Then he nodded once to the men. They dragged Derek toward a black car parked at the alley entrance. Derek started yelling then, struggling, cursing, threatening. The car door slammed. The engine started, and within seconds it was gone. The alley fell silent again. Cassidy's body began to shake uncontrollably as the adrenaline faded. Maxwell returned to her side and helped her sit up. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded weakly. When she tried, her knees gave out. Maxwell didn't hesitate. He lifted her into his arms, like she weighed nothing. She rested against his chest, too exhausted to protest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want trouble to follow me here." Maxwell's voice was quiet, but firm. "He'll never touch you again." There was something final in the way he said it, something that made her heart skip. She didn't ask what he meant. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. The car ride back to the mansion was silent. Maxwell took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth and the faint scent of his cologne made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. When they arrived, Gloria was already waiting at the door. "Emma is asleep," she said gently. Cassidy let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Maxwell guided her upstairs, not to her small staff room, but to a large bedroom on the second floor. His private doctor was already there. The examination was quiet and efficient. A split lip, deep bruising, one cracked rib. When the doctor left, Maxwell remained standing by the wall, watching her. His shirt sleeve had been rolled up. There was a dark stain near the cuff. Cassidy's eyes lingered on it. Then she looked up at him. "Where did they take him?" she asked quietly. Maxwell didn't answer right away. He walked closer to the bed, and when he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. "He won't be looking for you any more." The meaning settled slowly. Cassidy stared at him, and instead of fear, what she felt was relief. The relief came slowly. It wasn't the kind that felt light or joyful. It was deep, heavy, quiet, like a door inside her life had finally closed. Cassidy sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling in her lap. 4 years, she had lived with Derek's shadow hanging over her. Every loud noise, every unknown number, every stranger on the street. Fear had been part of her breathing, and now it was gone. She looked up at Maxwell. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why did you do this for me?" He didn't answer right away. He pulled a chair closer and sat across from her, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands loosely clasped. For a moment, he didn't look like a powerful man. He looked tired. "Because I couldn't save them," he said quietly. Cassidy frowned. "Save who?" "My wife," he said. "And my son." The room fell silent. Maxwell's eyes didn't meet hers. They were fixed somewhere past her, like he was looking into a memory he couldn't escape. "They were taken from me," he continued. "People who wanted to hurt me couldn't reach me, so they reached them." His voice stayed calm, but something inside it cracked. "I wasn't there," he said. "I didn't protect them. I didn't get a second chance." Cassidy's chest tightened. "I know what it feels like," he went on, "to come home to silence. To know you failed the people who trusted you to keep them safe." He finally looked at her. "When I saw him hurting you today, I wasn't going to fail again." Cassidy felt tears burn her eyes. She didn't know what to say. There were no words big enough for that kind of pain. Instead, she reached out without thinking and placed her hand gently over his. Maxwell stiffened. Not pulling away. Just surprised. "You didn't fail," she said softly. "You saved someone this time." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Maxwell turned his hand slightly, his fingers closing around hers. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even intentional. It was something quieter. Two people who knew what it meant to lose everything, holding on to something small and human. Later that night, Cassidy lay in the large bedroom Maxwell had given her, staring at the ceiling. Emma slept beside her in a crib, breathing softly. The house was quiet, but something felt different. Safer. And for the first time since she had moved into Thornton Manor, she didn't feel like a guest. She felt protected. The next few weeks passed slowly. Cassidy healed. The bruises faded. The crack in her rib hurt less each day. Maxwell didn't move her back to the staff room. He didn't explain why. No one questioned it. He also started coming home earlier. At first, he would just sit in the living room while Emma played on the floor. He kept his distance, his hands folded, watching quietly. But Emma had no sense of distance. One afternoon, she crawled straight toward him and dropped a wooden block onto his shoe. Maxwell froze. Cassidy held her breath from across the room. Emma looked up at him, smiled, and reached for his pant leg. Maxwell slowly bent down. Carefully, like he was approaching something fragile. He picked up the block and handed it back to her. Emma giggled. That was the first time Cassidy saw him smile. Not the polite smile he gave employees. A real one. Small, soft, but real. After that, something changed. Maxwell began sitting on the floor sometimes. Not close, but near enough that Emma would crawl over on her own. He still didn't pick her up. He still kept that invisible wall between them. Until the afternoon, everything shifted. Cassidy was in the kitchen cutting fruit while Emma sat in her high chair, tapping her spoon against the tray. Maxwell walked in, loosening his tie, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. "Long day?" Cassidy asked gently. He nodded and sat across from Emma. She watched him carefully, like she always did. Then her tiny hand reached out. She grabbed his finger. Maxwell went completely still. Cassidy stopped cutting. Emma squeezed his finger, laughed, and then said one word. "Papa." The knife slipped from Cassidy's hand and hit the counter with a soft clatter. Maxwell didn't move. His face went pale. Emma smiled and said it again, clearer this time. "Papa." The chair scraped loudly as Maxwell stood up too fast. "No," he whispered. His voice shook. "No, no, no." Then he turned and walked out of the kitchen. Fast. Cassidy lifted Emma and followed him, her heart racing. She found him in the living room. He stood in front of a large framed photograph above the fireplace. A woman. Beautiful, with dark hair and warm eyes. And in her arms, a newborn baby. Maxwell's shoulders were shaking. "I don't deserve that," he said hoarsely. "I couldn't protect my own child. I couldn't save him. I failed them." Cassidy stepped closer slowly. "You didn't fail Emma," she said quietly. "You saved her mother. You gave her a home. You make her feel safe." Maxwell turned, his eyes red. "I'm a man with blood on my hands," he said. "I don't get to be someone's father again." Emma reached toward him from Cassidy's arms. "Papa," she said softly. Something broke. Maxwell stepped forward and took her. Carefully, like he was afraid she might disappear. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. and Maxwell held her against his chest, his face buried in her hair. He was crying. Not quietly this time. Cassidy stood there, watching, knowing she was witnessing something fragile, something healing. From that day on, Maxwell didn't keep his distance anymore. He fed Emma sometimes, read to her at night, carried her through the house when she cried, and little by little, the cold emptiness inside Thornton Manor began to disappear. Life started to feel normal, peaceful, safe, until Cassidy began noticing something else. Maxwell was getting tired. Too tired. He stopped sometimes while walking, pressing his fingers to his temple. The dark circles under his eyes grew deeper. One evening, she brought him coffee to his study. The door was slightly open. Inside, she saw him sitting at his desk, his hand shaking as he swallowed several white pills. He locked the drawer quickly when he noticed her. "I'm fine," he said. But Cassidy didn't believe him. And a few nights later, she heard a loud crash upstairs. When she ran into his study, Maxwell was lying on the floor. For a moment, Cassidy couldn't move. The sight didn't feel real. Maxwell lay on the floor beside his desk, one arm twisted awkwardly under him. Papers were scattered across the carpet. A glass had shattered nearby, the dark stain of spilled whiskey spreading slowly toward his hand. "Maxwell!" She rushed forward and dropped to her knees beside him. His skin was cold. His breathing was shallow, uneven, like each breath cost him something. "Maxwell, can you hear me?" Her voice shook as she lifted his head gently into her lap. There was no response. Fear hit her so fast it made her dizzy. She grabbed the phone from the desk and called Isaac with trembling fingers. Her words came out rushed, broken. Isaac didn't ask questions. He just said he was coming. The next few minutes felt endless. Cassidy stayed there on the floor, holding Maxwell's hand, whispering his name over and over, as if her voice could pull him back. When Isaac arrived, he came with the private doctor. They worked quickly, efficiently, like this wasn't the first emergency they'd handled. Maxwell was carried to his bedroom. An injection. Monitors. Quiet, serious voices. Cassidy stood in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to breathe through the tightness in her chest. After what felt like hours, Maxwell's eyes finally opened. They were unfocused at first. Then they found her. Something passed through them. Not surprise. Not confusion. Resignation. Like he had been expecting this moment for a long time. "Everyone out," he said hoarsely. Isaac hesitated. "Max." "Please," Maxwell repeated. Isaac looked at Cassidy, then back at his brother. Whatever he saw made him nod. The doctor gathered his things, and the room slowly emptied. The door closed. Silence settled between them. Cassidy walked to the bed and sat carefully beside him. Her hands trembled, but her voice came out quiet. "What's going on?" Maxwell stared at the ceiling for a long moment before answering. "I was going to tell you eventually," he said. "I just hoped it would be later." Her heart began to pound. "Tell me what?" He turned his head toward her. "I'm dying." The words didn't make sense. Cassidy shook her head slowly. "No. I have a brain tumor," he continued calmly. "Terminal." The room felt like it tilted. "No," she said again, louder this time. "That's not true." "They diagnosed it in Germany 6 months ago," he said. "I went there for treatment. There isn't one. They gave me about 6 months." Her chest tightened so hard it hurt. Then there must be something. Surgery, another doctor, a trial. Maxwell gave a faint, tired smile. "I've already tried everything money can buy." The words landed heavy. Money could buy anything. Except time. How long? She whispered. He didn't answer right away. 3 months, he said finally. Maybe less. Cassidy stared at him. 3 months. 3 months for Emma. 3 months for the man who had become the center of their safe little world. 3 months for the life she had just started to believe in. Tears blurred her vision. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because I didn't want you to look at me like that," he said softly. "Like I'm already gone." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. "I'm not looking at you like that," she whispered. "I'm looking at the man who saved my daughter. The man she calls Papa." Maxwell closed his eyes. "I was planning to put everything in order," he said. "Finish my business. Set things up so no one would have to worry about me when I'm gone." His hand lifted slowly and rested against her cheek. "Then you and Emma showed up." Cassidy's tears fell onto the sheets. "You gave me something I didn't expect," he said. "A reason to come home early. A reason to sit at the dinner table. A reason to feel like a person instead of a machine waiting to shut down." His thumb brushed under her eye. "And that's exactly why this is dangerous," he added quietly. "Why?" she asked. "Because the more I care about you, the more it's going to hurt when I leave." The words broke something inside her. "You don't get to decide that alone," she said. Maxwell frowned slightly. "You think you're protecting us by keeping your distance," she continued, her voice trembling but steady. "But Emma already loves you. And whether you want to admit it or not." She swallowed. "So do I." The room went still. Maxwell's breath caught. Cassidy didn't look away. "I'm not afraid of the time we have," she said softly. "I'm afraid of wasting it." For the first time, his composure cracked. His hand tightened around hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to build something knowing it's going to end." "Then don't think about the ending," she said. "Just live the days you have." Silence stretched between them. Then Maxwell slowly pulled her into his arms. Not carefully this time. Not cautiously. He held her tightly, like someone holding on to warmth in the middle of a storm. That night, he didn't ask her to leave. She stayed. They lay side by side, not touching at first. Then his hand found hers in the darkness. And neither of them let go. The next morning, the house felt different. Quieter. Heavier. But Maxwell came downstairs for breakfast. He sat with Emma. He even laughed when she smeared oatmeal across his sleeve. It looked almost normal. But Cassidy could see it. The paleness in his skin. The way he pressed his fingers to his temple when he thought no one was looking. Time wasn't just passing. It was running. 3 days later, Maxwell called her into his study. When Cassidy walked in, she saw a thick stack of documents spread across his desk. His expression was calm again. Businesslike. Controlled. "Sit down," he said. Her stomach tightened as she took the chair across from him. Maxwell pushed the papers toward her. "I need to talk to you about what happens after I'm gone." Cassidy stared at the documents, and a quiet fear began to grow. Because whatever he was about to say, she knew it was going to change everything. Cassidy didn't touch the papers right away. They looked heavy, not because of their size, but because of what they meant. Maxwell watched her quietly, giving her time. "What is all this?" she asked finally. "My will," he said. The word made her chest tighten. "I have properties, companies, investments," he continued. "Assets in different countries. Some clean. Some less clean. Everything is listed there." Cassidy swallowed. "Why are you showing this to me?" "Because when I'm gone, it needs to belong to someone." She pushed the stack slightly back toward him. You have Isaac. Maxwell nodded. He's my legal heir right now. But he doesn't want this life. He's been telling me for years he wants out. A normal life. Away from all of this. Cassidy frowned. Then give it to someone else, she said softly. A board. A charity. Anyone. Maxwell shook his head. No one else will be safe with it. The way he said safe made her uneasy. I don't understand, she admitted. Maxwell stood and walked around the desk, stopping in front of her. When I die, there will be people who think my power is up for grabs, he said. Business rivals. Old enemies. People who would see an opportunity. Cassidy's stomach dropped. And you think they'll come after me? She asked quietly. I know they will, he replied. Unless you're protected. She looked up at him. I already am, she said. I live here. Maxwell's expression didn't change. This house won't protect you when I'm gone, he said. My name will. The silence stretched. Then he said it. I want you to marry me. Cassidy blinked. For a second, she thought she had heard him wrong. What? Marry me, he repeated calmly. Legally. Become my wife. When I die, everything transfers to you without challenge. No one questions a widow. No one touches the Thornton name. The words hung in the air. Cassidy stood slowly, her legs weak. You're serious? Yes. This is about money, she said, her voice rising slightly. About power. This is about protection, he corrected gently. She shook her head. I'm not the kind of woman who marries someone for their money. I know, he said quietly. That's exactly why I'm asking you. That stopped her. I'm not offering you a deal, Maxwell continued. I'm offering you security. For Emma. For her future. Cassidy turned away, walking toward the window, trying to steady her breathing. This was too much. Too fast. You don't love me, she said. Maxwell didn't answer immediately. I care about you, he said finally. And I care about Emma. You brought life back into this house. You gave me something I didn't think I'd feel again. He stepped closer, but kept a respectful distance. This isn't about replacing my past, he added. And it's not about pretending we have something we don't. It's about making sure you never have to be afraid again. Cassidy closed her eyes. She saw Emma's face. Her small hands. Her future. If anything happened to Cassidy, where would Emma go? Back to poverty? To a system that didn't care? You're asking me to become the wife of a dying man, she whispered. Yes. You're asking me to watch you die. Maxwell's voice was steady. Yes. Tears filled her eyes. This is insane. I know. She turned back to him. And after you're gone? She asked. I'll be a young widow with a fortune and enemies I don't understand? You'll have lawyers. Security. People loyal to my name, he said. And most importantly, you'll have power. Enough that no one will ever treat you like you're powerless again. That word hit her. Powerless. It was exactly what she had been her entire life. Until now. Cassidy sank back into the chair. Her hands rested on the stack of papers. For a long time, she didn't speak. Finally, she whispered, I need time. Maxwell nodded. You have a week. He turned and walked back to his desk, giving her space. But as she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Cassidy. She paused. I'm not doing this because I'm dying, he said quietly. She turned. I'm doing this because you and Emma are the only family I have left. The words followed her out of the room. That night, Cassidy didn't sleep. Emma lay beside her, breathing softly, her tiny hand curled near her face. Cassidy watched her for hours. She thought about the apartment with mold on the walls, the nights she went hungry so Emma could eat, the fear, the running, the hiding. Then she thought about the mansion. Warm rooms, safety, a future where Emma could go to good schools, grow up without fear, without struggle. But there was another truth she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about money. This was about Maxwell, the man who sat on the floor and let a little girl play with his tie, the man who stayed up when Emma had a fever, the man who was dying. The next few days passed in a quiet fog. Maxwell didn't pressure her. He acted the same. Breakfast with Emma. Short walks through the house. Gentle smiles that looked more tired each day. And every time Cassidy saw him pause to steady himself against a wall, the clock felt louder. On the 6th night, she found him standing alone in the living room. The lights were off. Only the glow from the fireplace lit the space. He was looking at the photograph above it. His wife. His son. His shoulders were tense, like he was holding himself together by force. Cassidy watched him from the hallway. For the first time, she didn't see a powerful man. She saw someone who was alone. Someone who was running out of time. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. The next morning, she knocked on the study door. Maxwell looked up as she walked in. His eyes searched her face. Cassidy took a breath. "I'll marry you," she said. He didn't move. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then she added quietly, "But I have one condition." Maxwell stepped forward slowly. "What is it?" Cassidy held his gaze. "If we do this, we don't pretend." Silence filled the room. "We eat together," she continued. "You spend time with Emma. You don't hide your pain. You don't disappear into your work. You don't live like a man waiting to die." Her voice softened. "You live like a husband, like a father, like someone who still has something worth staying for." Maxwell's eyes darkened slightly, because what she was asking for wasn't protection. It was something much harder. She was asking him to open his heart again. Maxwell didn't speak right away. He stood there, close enough that she could see the faint tremor in his hands, the exhaustion behind his eyes, and something else. Fear. Not of death. Of hope. "You're asking me to love again," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to live," Cassidy replied. The silence between them stretched, heavy and honest. Maxwell searched her face, as if trying to understand whether she truly knew what she was offering, and what she was risking. Because love, when time is short, doesn't protect the heart. It breaks it faster. Finally, he stepped closer. His hand rose slowly and rested against her cheek. "I don't know how long I have," he said. Cassidy held his gaze. "Then we make the time count." Something shifted in his expression. The wall he had been holding up for months finally cracked. He leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. "I agree," he whispered. The wedding was simple. No press. No business partners. No society guests. Just a quiet ceremony in the garden behind the mansion. Isaac stood beside Maxwell. Gloria held Emma, who wore a tiny white dress and kept clapping her hands, not understanding anything except that everyone around her was smiling. Cassidy wore a simple gown. No diamonds. No heavy jewelry. Just the small pearl earrings Maxwell had given her that morning. When the officiant finished, Maxwell took her hands. "I don't promise forever," he said quietly. "I don't have forever to give. But every day I have left belongs to you and Emma." Cassidy's voice trembled when it was her turn. "I don't come with wealth or power," she said. I come with scars, fears, and a child who needs a father. But I promise this, you won't face your days alone again." When they kissed, Emma's voice broke the quiet. "Papa." Maxwell laughed through tears and lifted her into his arms. For the first time in a long time, the mansion didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a home. The weeks that followed became something none of them expected. Maxwell came home early. He learned how to change diapers. He read bedtime stories in a voice that was too serious for children, but Emma listened like he was the most important person in the world. He burned his first attempt at making porridge. Cassidy laughed so hard she cried. They ate meals together, walked in the garden, sat on the floor building blocks. The house filled with small sounds, laughter, footsteps, life. But the illness didn't disappear. The headaches came more often. Some nights, Maxwell held his head in his hands, breathing through the pain. Cassidy never left his side. She studied beside his desk when he worked. He made coffee for her during long nights of online classes. When her first exam results came back at the top of her class, she cried. Maxwell held her and said, "You were always meant for more. You just needed someone to believe it." Time moved forward. Slow. Precious. And then one morning, everything changed. Maxwell's phone rang during breakfast. The international number made his hand freeze. Germany. Cassidy reached across the table and held his hand. "Answer it," she said softly. "We face it together." He put the call on speaker. The doctor's voice sounded tense. "Mr. Thornton, there has been a serious mistake." The room went completely still. "A laboratory error," the doctor continued. "Your test results were switched with another patient's." Maxwell's grip tightened around Cassidy's hand. "What are you saying?" he asked quietly. "You do not have a brain tumor," the doctor said. "You never did." For a moment, no one moved. Emma dropped her spoon onto the tray with a small clatter. Cassidy blinked. Maxwell stared at the table. "I'm not dying," he whispered. "You are completely healthy," the doctor confirmed. The phone slipped from his hand. Silence broke. Cassidy burst into tears. Not quiet tears. Not careful tears. The kind that come from months of fear finally breaking open. Maxwell stood suddenly, his chair falling backward. He looked at her. Then at Emma. Then back at Cassidy. And he laughed. Then cried. Then pulled both of them into his arms. "I'm staying," he kept whispering. "I'm staying." Emma squealed, not understanding, but laughing because they were laughing. That day changed everything. But the real change didn't come from the medical mistake. It came from what Maxwell chose afterward. He began stepping away from the criminal side of his empire. Slowly. Carefully. Illegal operations were shut down. Companies were restructured. Money was redirected into legitimate businesses, education programs, and housing projects. Isaac helped him transition everything. "You didn't change because you were dying," Isaac said one evening. Maxwell looked at Cassidy and Emma playing in the garden. "I changed because I finally had something worth living for." 2 months later, Cassidy stood in the bathroom holding a pregnancy test. 2 lines. Her hands shook as she walked into the bedroom. Maxwell looked up. She held it out silently. He stared. Then his face broke. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like the world might disappear if he let go. "I get another chance," he whispered. "This time, I'll be there from the beginning." 1 year later, the garden was full of spring flowers. Emma, almost 2, ran across the grass carrying a handful of petals. "Papa." "Pretty." Maxwell sat on the lawn, placing each flower carefully into Cassidy's hair. Her hand rested on her growing belly. The doctor had confirmed it was a boy. Nearby, a set of legal papers rested on a small table. Emma Thornton. Officially adopted. Chosen. Protected. Loved. Cassidy leaned her head against Maxwell's shoulder. "A year ago, I was scrubbing floors and hiding from the world," she said quietly. "Now I have a family. A future. A life I never thought I deserved." Maxwell kissed her hair. "A year ago, I thought my life was over," he said. "Then you walked into my house with a sick baby, and gave me a reason to live again." Emma climbed into his lap and kissed both their cheeks. "Papa, Mama, love." And in that moment, sitting under the warm sun, surrounded by laughter and second chances, one truth became clear. The man who owned half the city didn't find happiness in his wealth. He found it in a poor woman's courage, and a little girl who called him Papa. Because sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't money or power. Sometimes, the greatest miracle is love finding you when you thought your life was already over. And the real wealth in this world isn't what you own. It's the people who choose to stay. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what country or region are you watching from? I'd love to know where you're listening from today.